If there's one thing I've learned from this whole debacle, it's that words are slippery little devils. You think you're just tossing them out there like confetti at a parade, only to find out they're more like grenades wrapped in ribbons, pretty, shiny, and deadly when they explode unexpectedly. Here I was, sitting in the dim corner of the cafe of infinite laughter, the very epicenter of my comedic apocalypse, clutching a crumpled sheet of jokes like it was a lifeline, or maybe just a warning label I'd ignored. The cafe hummed softly around me, a bizarre symphony of muffled chuckles, whispered punchlines, and the occasional strange clink of cups that sounded suspiciously like laughter trapped in glass. I stared down at the words I'd scribbled before the world went sideways. How innocent they seemed. How utterly innocent until they weren't. Luna slid into the seat opposite me, her purple hair a wild splash of color against the cafe's muted palette. She leaned forward, eyes gleaming with that mischievous spark that always made you wonder if she was about to share a secret or a punchline that would punch back. She began, voice low and conspiratorial, laughter's a bit like fire. It can warm you on a cold night or burn your house down if you're not careful. I wanted to roll my eyes, but instead, I just nodded. It was true. This joke-fueled inferno was proof enough. I'd always thought humor was a harmless escape, a way to poke at the absurdities of life without consequence. But now, with the world turned into a carnival mirror reflecting every twisted quip, I had a front row seat to the chaos humor could unleash. Gerald shuffled over, trench coat flapping like a grumpy flag of doom. He plopped down with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of every failed joke and sarcastic remark ever uttered in this place. Funny's a mess, he grumbled, voice rough but edged with reluctant care. It's a weapon and a shield, and right now, it's got us pinned in the corner. You think you can fix this with some magic word? It's not that simple. His skepticism was a cold splash of reality, but beneath the gruff exterior, I sensed something else, hope, maybe buried deep under layers of cynicism. The cafe seemed to breathe with us, walls pulsing softly as if alive with the very jokes that had twisted reality. Whispers floated on the air, fragments of laughter and punchlines that danced just out of reach, reminding us that humor was no mere entertainment here. It was a force wild, unpredictable, and dangerously alive. I swallowed hard, feeling the crushing weight of my own words. The responsibility was no longer theoretical. It was raw and urgent. Every joke I'd ever told, every sarcastic quip I'd tossed aside without thought, suddenly mattered. Maybe that's the point. I muttered more to myself than anyone else. Humor heals, but it hurts too. It's a double-edged sword, and we've been swinging it around blindfolded. Luna smiled, a little sad, a little proud. Exactly. And now you have to decide how to wield it. Are you ready for that? Gerald snorted but didn't disagree. Ready or not, kid, this is your mess. Time to clean it up. The conversation settled into a heavy silence, the kind that presses down and forces you to reckon with truths you'd rather dodge. I looked around the cafe, this surreal nexus of absurdity, and realized that I was standing at the crossroads of chaos and order, humor and havoc. Could I really control the power I'd unleashed? Could I find the balance between laughter's light and shadow? The unfunniest word was supposed to be the key, a way to silence the chaos and bring back normalcy. But what if silencing the laughter meant silencing something essential in ourselves? The cafe's magic flickered again, the whispers growing louder as if urging me to decide. My heart pounded, not just from fear but from a strange, fierce determination. I wasn't just a comedian anymore. I was a man who'd learned the true weight of words, and I was ready to pay the price. But as I stood ready to move forward, a final thought gnawed at me. What if some jokes were meant to live forever, even if they hurt? What if laughter, with all its chaos and risk, was the only thing keeping the darkness at bay? The answer wasn't clear, but the choice was mine. And the clock was ticking. I pushed back my chair, the echoes of laughter and whispers swirling around me like a storm. One thing was certain, after this, nothing would ever be the same. Because sometimes the heaviest burden isn't the chaos you create, it's the silence you leave behind. And with that, I stepped into the unfolding madness, ready to face whatever punchline lay ahead. If you had told me a week ago that the key to undoing the chaos that had swallowed our city was a single word, an unfunniest word, no less, I probably would have laughed. Or, more accurately, I would have cracked a joke so bad it could have caused a minor seismic event. But here I was, hunched over a table in the cafe of infinite laughter, the place where jokes come to life in all their absurd glory. And the air was thick with the sort of tension you only get when the fate of reality itself is riding on your ability to keep a straight face. Luna was perched beside me, her bright purple hair glowing faintly under the shifting neon lights. She wore that mischievous grin of hers, the one that suggested she knew far more than she was letting on. And, to be honest, she did. It was Luna who had first mentioned the unfunniest word, a mythical phrase whispered about in the cafe's shadowy corners. A phrase so humorless that it could neutralize the magic binding the world in this endless carnival of absurdity. "You're sure this isn't some elaborate prank?" I asked, eyeing her skeptically. After all, the cafe was a place where reality bent for the sake of a punchline, and I was no stranger to pranks gone wrong. She chuckled softly. "Max, if I wanted to prank you, I'd have you try reciting a limerick backwards while balancing a teacup on your head. This is different. This is real." I sighed and turned my attention back to the ancient tomes spread before me. They were ridiculous. Really the kind of books you'd expect to find in a magician's attic or the lost and forgotten library of a comedian who took himself a little too seriously. But nestled among the nonsensical riddles and puns was something different, a passage that described the unfunniest word. It's said to be a word or phrase that, when spoken aloud, nullifies the magic of the cafe, Luna explained, tracing her finger over the faded text. It's humorless, joyless, and completely devoid of any punchline. I raised an eyebrow. Sounds like the ultimate party pooper. She smiled, but there was a seriousness in her eyes that undercut the joke. Exactly. It's the counterbalance to all this madness. But it's not just any word. It has to be the right one. For hours, we pored over the texts, Luna deciphering cryptic notes, and I scribbling down every potential candidate. The cafe seemed to hold its breath around us, the usual cacophony of laughter and absurdity fading to a low hum. Outside, the city, our city, still twisted in the grip of the joke-induced chaos. But here, in this pocket of quiet, hope felt almost tangible. I could feel the weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders. This wasn't just about fixing a messed-up joke anymore, it was about restoring balance. Humor, as I'd learned the hard way, was a double-edged sword. It could heal, entertain, and connect us. But left unchecked, could spiral into something dangerous and uncontrollable. "Are you ready?" Luna's voice pulled me from my thoughts. I nodded, swallowing the lump of anxiety lodged in my throat. As ready as I'll ever be. We moved to the center of the cafe, where the walls pulsed with the neon glow of infinite laughter. The patrons paused, their chaotic antics stilled as if sensing the gravity of the moment. I took a deep breath and whispered the word, the unfunniest word. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, the laughter began to fade, the colors dimmed, and the surreal distortions of reality slowly unraveled. The cafe, the city, the world all settling back toward normalcy. But even as the chaos ebbed, I knew things would never be the same. The power of humor was too vast, too unpredictable, and I had glimpsed both its light and its shadows. As the last echoes of laughter dwindled, I felt a bittersweet pang, relief mingled with the loss of a peculiar kind of magic. "You did it," Luna said softly, her mischievous grin replaced by a rare, sincere smile. I managed a crooked smile of my own. "Yeah, I guess the show goes on." And with that, the cafe's neon lights flickered once more, this time not with infinite laughter, but with the quiet promise of a new beginning. But just between you and me, I'm still wondering, was that really the unfunniest word, or just the beginning of a whole new kind of joke? Because in this city and in this cafe, you never quite know when the punchline might strike again. I stood at the center of the cafe's heart, the place where the magic pulsed strongest, a room that seemed to breathe, walls flexing like the rib cage of some great cosmic joke. The air was thick with echoes of laughter that had no source, a cacophony of mirth and madness that threatened to swallow me whole. Somewhere in the distance, the clinking of coffee cups mingled with the sound of an invisible audience's chuckles, each ripple of sound twisting reality into a carnival mirror. The trickster loomed before me, a grotesque patchwork of shifting shapes and grinning faces that flickered like a malfunctioning neon sign. Its eyes glimmered with wild delight, reflecting every punchline and prank it had ever spawned. "You think a word will stop the show?" it hissed, the voice a blend of every comedic trope ever uttered, from slapstick pratfalls to biting satire. Humor is eternal. It feeds me. It is me. I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of every joke I'd ever told, every sarcastic quip that had spun the world into this absurd web. I'd chased the myth of the unfunniest word for what felt like an eternity, through endless loops of laughter and chaos, through nights that melted into surreal dawns. Now, with the world's fate balanced on my tongue, I had to believe that silence, or something almost like it, unraveled the madness. Taking a deep breath, I let the words slip out, strange and clumsy on my lips. It was an awkward, stammering sound, devoid of wit or charm, the very essence of humorlessness, an anti-punchline so banal it felt like swallowing a mouthful of dust. The moment it left me, the laughter faltered, the walls stilled, and the heavy air began to clear. The trickster's grin twitched, then cracked, its form flickering uncertainly, the chaotic energy that sustained it draining like water through a sieve. "No," it croaked, voice losing its mirth, shifting into something thin, fragile. You silenced the laughter, but the silence grew. The echoes of jokes died away, one by one, until the cafe's once vibrant neon glow dulled into soft pastels, the garish colors of chaos replaced by the gentle hues of normalcy. The chairs stopped spinning, the walls settled into their original shapes, and the bustling soundscape returned to the quiet hum of an ordinary cafe. Luna appeared beside me, her purple hair less wild, her mischievous grin softened by exhaustion. "You did it," she said quietly, eyes scanning the now peaceful room. "The joke's over." Gerald, ever the grump, adjusted his trench coat and gave a rare nod, his skepticism replaced by a reluctant respect. "Finally. I thought we'd be stuck here forever." But as relief washed over me, a strange emptiness settled too. The laughter was gone, yes, but with it vanished the spark of chaos that had made the world feel alive, unpredictable, and absurdly beautiful in its madness. I was left holding the fragile balance between order and chaos, humor and silence. Is this really an ending? I wondered aloud, voice barely more than a whisper. Or just the pause before the next punchline. The trickster was gone, banished back into the shadows of forgotten jokes. But its presence lingered, a reminder that humor was a double-edged sword, capable of both lighting up the darkest rooms and slicing through the fabric of reality itself. I looked around the cafe, now quiet and subdued, and felt the weight of the journey settle on my shoulders. The unfunniest word had silenced the chaos, but it had also changed me, carved new lines of wisdom and caution into my wary face. Outside, the city breathed in its newfound calm, unaware of how close it had come to becoming an endless punchline. And inside me, a flicker of hope remained, fragile but steady, a promise that laughter, tempered by understanding, could still find its place in a world that needed both order and absurdity. I stepped away from the center, the cafe's magic retreating like a tide, and prepared to face the world he knew. The stage was set, the spotlight waiting. This time, I would choose my words with care, knowing that every joke carried a weight far greater than its laugh. Because sometimes the greatest punchline is the one that teaches us when to be silent. The city breathed again, but it was a quieter breath, a cautious one, as if even the pavement beneath my feet was wary of cracking a smile too wide. The absurdity that had painted the streets with impossible hues and laughter now faded into the mundane hum of everyday life: car horns, footsteps, conversations about weather, and the latest scandal at the council. I wandered through this newly subdued world, each familiar corner a reminder of the chaos I had unleashed and quelled. It was strange walking through streets that felt both the same and utterly different. The lampposts stood straight instead of bending like rubber canes. Shop signs no longer sang or argued with passersby. The pigeons, mercifully, had stopped reciting poetry in unison. The silence of normalcy was deafening after the uproarious symphony of the past days. Yet, amid this stillness, I felt the weight of what had transpired, the fragile power of a joke to shape reality, to carve cracks in the veneer of logic. Back at the cafe of infinite laughter, the place seemed to pulse with a quieter magic. The air smelled faintly of roasted coffee beans and old paper, a scent that now felt like a balm instead of a warning. I found a corner table, the same one I'd occupied during that fateful open mic, and sat with my hands wrapped around a warm cup. The cafe was no longer a carnival of chaos but a sanctuary of reflection, a place where the echoes of laughter softened into thoughtful silence. Luna appeared as if summoned by my brooding thoughts. Her purple hair, usually a vivid blaze of color, seemed a shade more subdued, yet the flicker of mischievous light in her eyes remained undimmed. "You look like you've seen the end of the world and decided to have a coffee with it," she quipped, sliding into the seat opposite me. Her voice was gentle, a contrast to her usual sharp sarcasm, and it wrapped around me like a warm cloak. "Maybe I did," I replied, managing a crooked smile that felt less like a shield and more like a truce. "Or maybe the end was just the beginning of understanding." She nodded, her grin softening. "Humor is a double-edged sword, Max. It can heal or hurt, build or break. It's not the jokes themselves, but how we wield them. You learn that the hard way." The words settled deep within me, resonating with the lessons etched by chaos. I thought of Gerald, the grumpy skeptic, who had been my reluctant companion through the madness. I pictured him standing outside the cafe, his trench coat flapping in the mildly chilly breeze, muttering about the absurdity of it all, but with a hint of gratitude in his eyes. Even he, for all his cynicism, had softened. Perhaps the world had too. I realized that while the world had returned to its usual rhythm, I had been irrevocably changed. The power of words, the peril and promise of laughter, was no longer just a theoretical concept or a punchline waiting for delivery. It was a living force I had danced with, stumbled over, and finally learned to respect. My jokes would never be the same. I would choose them with care, understanding that beneath every laugh lay a ripple that could either comfort or disrupt. And so, as I sat there in the quiet cafe, the shadows of the past days flickering around me like ghosts of punchlines past, I made a silent vow. To be wiser, to be braver, and to embrace the bittersweet dance between laughter and silence. Because humor, like life, was messy and unpredictable, but that was exactly what made it worth the risk. Outside, the city continued on, a little less absurd, a little more real. And for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to step back onto the stage of life, not as a man desperate for laughs, but as one who understood the true weight of every word he spoke. With a final sip of coffee, I stood, smoothed the worn fabric of my jacket, and walked out of the cafe into a world that was ordinary, extraordinary, and entirely mine once more. The stage was set, the spotlight ready, and this time I knew exactly how to play my part. But as I stepped forward, a small, mischievous smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. Because in the end, some laughter was necessary, just not all at once. And certainly not without knowing when to be silent. I suppose it all started on a night when the universe decided my sense of humor was less a gift and more a ticking time bomb. There I was, Max, a struggling comedian whose career was teetering on the edge of oblivion, nursing a lukewarm coffee in a dive bar that smelled faintly of burnt dreams and stale beer. The kind of place where laughter was rarer than a good punchline, and even rarer still was the kind of joke that made you forget your troubles for more than a second. I was drowning in self-doubt, a jester with a cracked crown, until an odd little neon sign blinked me into a different kind of night, the Cafe of Infinite Laughter. The sign buzzed with a mischievous glow, casting vibrant neon blues and pinks across the rain-slicked pavement. Curiosity, that reckless beast, pulled me through the door before my brain could vetter the idea. Inside, the cafe was like stepping into a fever dream stitched together from the scraps of old comedy routines and surreal nightmares. The air was thick with the scent of burnt toast and something faintly electric, like static charged with anticipation. Patrons milled about, their faces flickering between amusement and madness as if they were puppets tangled in invisible strings of hilarity. I found myself a corner seat, nursing a cup of coffee that tasted like dark chocolate mixed with a hint of irony. The open mic was about to start, and despite the nervous lump lodged in my throat, I told myself this was my shot, the comeback story that would resurrect my career. I stepped onto the stage, the spotlight a harsh interrogator that exposed every jitter and stutter. My jokes, rehearsed and polished, fell flat like damp fireworks. The room was a graveyard of silence, save for a few polite coughs and the occasional clink of a glass. Frustration welled up, and in a last-ditch bid to salvage the moment, I threw out a sarcastic quip, so dry it could have set the Sahara ablaze. The words hung in the air, and suddenly the cafe seemed to ripple. The lights skewed, the walls pulsed, and a strange electric hum filled the room. Patrons' eyes gleamed with unnatural light, and the very fabric of reality began to twist. I blinked, trying to make sense of the surreal spectacle unfolding before me. Stepping outside, the city was unrecognizable. Street lamps sprouted rubber chickens instead of bulbs. Pigeons strutted around reciting knock-knock jokes, and the faces of strangers morphed into caricatures of punchlines, their laughter echoing unnaturally through the streets. It was as if the world itself had become one giant joke, a carnival of chaos where logic had thrown up its hands and fled. I was about to lose my mind when Luna appeared. She emerged from the cafe's shadows like a beacon of strange sanity, her bright purple hair a stark contrast to the swirling madness outside. With a mischievous grin and eyes that held secrets, she leaned in and whispered, "Welcome to the Cafe of Infinite Laughter, Max. You just pulled the trigger on a joke that's rewriting reality, and now you re-stuck in the punchline." Her words hit me like a gut punch. Trapped in a world where every joke I or anyone else told came alive, I realized that humor, my once trusted weapon, was now a double-edged sword cutting through the fabric of existence. If I wanted to survive hell, if I wanted to fix this mess, I had to understand the cafe's power and find a way to undo the chaos I'd unleashed. And so began my descent into absurdity, a journey through a city transformed into a living joke, where the punchline was no longer just a clever twist, but a dangerous reality waiting to unravel everything I thought I knew about humor, life, and myself. But first, I had to figure out what the hell the unfunniest word was, because if there was a way to silence this madness, it had to be found and fast. Because in a world where every laugh could turn into a disaster, sometimes the only way to fight fire was with the dreest, most humorless ember imaginable. And that, dear reader, is where my story truly begins.